So hi everybody. How are you still feeling in this evening? Tired? Yes. Sleepy? Yeah. So maybe a little joke will help. Do you want to hear a joke about bad karma? Yeah. So I'm having my period. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent timing. Are you feeling awkward with this information? Yeah. So am I. So I am Camila. I am a software engineer at Nextcloud. I have been living for too long in Germany. I am originally from Brazil. And this is my dog, Popcorn. She is in this slide just because she's cute. And she's the only German in the family. So this is what I want to share with you today. We start talking about why to talk about periods at all, especially in a technical conference. What does it have to do with anything, right? How does Nextcloud is connected to it, and why you need a period tracker, like why is that relevant? And I am creating my own application to track my period, and I would like to share a bit of my journey from trying different things to trying to write my own app. Because I'm actually a developer in the desktop team. I work on the sync client for Nextcloud, so it's a very different technology. So it was a bit of a learning curve for me to get to writing some PHP code. So I guess all of us here in this room know someone who has a menstrual cycle, right? So data shows that at a given point, each day, 26% of the global population is menstruating. Menstruating will account for more than 50% of their average lifespan. So that's a lot of bleeding. And if you want to talk about a period, in some areas, rural areas of Nepal, you need to get isolated in a mud hut, like this one in the picture. So this is a practice that they have, where they banish usually young girls to this place where they can have their period with other people who is going through the cycle. So this practice is because they really believe if someone is having their period and they are with their family, it might bring bad luck and illness to them. If you think about it, is it really different in our society? The bar to talk about the female body is actually really low. Like, when you talk about the female body, is usually, the feeling of feeling gross out about it is usually what you see and hear. From nipples to menstrual blood is usually something that you learn from a very young age that you have to hide it. You shouldn't show your nipples, you shouldn't talk about your period, you should hide your tampons, you should hide your pads, right? It's almost like there is something wrong with it, correct? And even though we all know if you have a female body, you're going through a menstrual cycle. This is always expected. The same way when you have a baby, you are expected to breastfeed it, right? We all know this happens. But then why? What's the logic in it that we all have to hide it, right? In some places, you cannot breastfeed in public. Again, because the female body is something, you shouldn't see, you shouldn't talk about it. And if you go a bit back, so when women were advocated to get university degrees, one of the reasons people would argue against it is because they expected you to spend at least a week of the month in bed resting because of your period. And then if you go even further back, in ancient Egypt, when the first period would come, it was celebrated. They would even use the blood to do rituals, to protect babies from evil, or to boost someone's fertility. So that's a big contrast. So when you really think about it, in the end, it's just society giving meaning to something that didn't have to have any meaning. It's just a body working, doing its thing. It's just our bodies. So, because it is a very loaded conversation, and we learn to hide and be ashamed of it, like we did something wrong, it can take up to 80 years to get a proper diagnosis when you have menstrual issues. So how do you know if you have too much pain or too little pain if you don't talk about it, right? So for me, this is, let's say, a highlight from my talk. I mean, that's, if you want to take something with you today, this is something I would like you to remember. So if you want to treat everyone equally, I really think we need to talk about those differences. It doesn't really work to just add females to a software engineering team and be like, great work, we have diversity, our job here is done. So you might be the only person in your team who has a menstrual cycle. You might be the only person in your team who is an immigrant. You might be the only person who is a person of color. And there are so many things that make us more self-aware, and being the only one only adds stress to it. So besides just like going through a menstrual cycle, of course, every month, and then you hear comments and on everyday work or in our open source communities, they will remind you that you are not welcome. So it might be, you might see different people in different conferences in your workplace, but is that really being inclusive, right? So at work, are you making them feel bad because they have to ask for sick leave once a month? Who takes care of the kids at home when they are at work? Do we really try to give everyone flexibility to be able to do their best at work or at our communities? So if you talk about the problem, then it is real. It's not just something in someone's head. And if you can talk about it, this means you can find a solution to give everyone an equal chance to be a health member of the open source communities and of the tech workforce. Coding like a girl is not a bad thing. We should all embrace our difference and talk about it. People don't even learn with the same methods, right? We all have different ways that you like to do things and how we can learn, much less we don't all work the same way. So I am here in a tech conference talking about Nextcloud, periods, and I just shared something very private, right? Why you should listen to me when I talk about privacy on the internet, right? So I decided years ago that I really wanted to talk about my periods and be open about it with people, because I read an article talking about how loaded it is to go through a menstrual cycle, all the shame that's involved into it. So for me, it was very freeing to realize that I didn't have to hide it. As I say, there's no logic to it. It's just society expectations, and that doesn't really match reality. So, well, that's why I'm here today. So I learned this, and then now I can share it, and I can share it when I want it and how I want to do that. So privacy is not only about hiding things, but it's also about what we let other people know, what we choose to let people know, and how we control the narrative about ourselves and our loved ones. So what's the impression that you want to let people have of you? So this is part of choosing how you want to share things. So why do you close the door when you go to the restroom? We all know what you're going to do in there, most likely. Everybody has a pretty good idea of what you're doing there, and we close the door. It's not because you're trying to hide something. It's about what you don't want to share with other people. So privacy on the internet is part of it. Do you want companies to know if you're pregnant or planning to conceive before you even have shared that with your family? How do you feel about seeing baby diapers advertising in social media when you just learned that you cannot have kids? That's what's done with parts of your life that you had not agreed to share with anyone yet. And this information, even though you have not agreed to it, is already in someone's server somewhere. So we could argue that maybe advertising is not so bad. This is fine, just advertising. But can you think what governments could do if they have this kind of information about you? Could you imagine one or two scenarios where that could be used against you? So a drive through the city on a Saturday afternoon, could that be used against you? Did you visit your mother, or did you go to an abortion clinic? So during my research, I learned that apps are not under the same privacy laws that doctors are. So they actually really can sell and use this information about you without your consent with very little consequence. So if you have too much period pain or you have no period at all, this is kind of information that could be really helpful to your doctor, or we go to big pharma and companies and governments. It's something that you can choose. Of course, I'm trying to make a point about period tracker apps, right? But any application that you have in your phone, it could be tracking your data, your location. So that brings me to Nextcloud. So Nextcloud, I think some of you probably are here because of it. It's a self-hosted solution. It's open source, has been around for more than 10 years. And the main thing about this project is that you can host the server yourself, wherever you want to host it. It could be even a server in your own living room. So Nextcloud is not only, so the main thing about Nextcloud is privacy, and we have a lot of applications that we can use too. So we have this, what you call Nextcloud Hub, which are files, stock, groupware, and Office. So this is files, and on the browser, you can share your files, photos with your family, comment on it. And this is stock, which is a chat and video application. Groupware includes calendar, contacts, and deck. Deck is a Kanban board app to organize tasks. And then we also have Office, which is based on Collaborate Online. So you can edit documents, spreadsheets with other people. It's essentially LibreOffice Online. We also have a Collectives app, which is a knowledge management, like a wiki. And this is the desktop client. That's the team that I'm part of. You can use this application on your Linux machine or Windows or macOS to sync your files. Besides the desktop applications, you have mobile applications for the same purpose, for Android and iOS. So why you need a period tracker app? So the point of having a period tracker app is it is mainly organization, planning, and taking care of yourself. So there are plenty of apps out there, but how many there are that really care about your privacy? So with this in mind, I would like to explain how I have been trying to use Nextcloud to track my period, some suggestions maybe, and of course how I decided and what I'm doing to write an application for that. So first of all, Nextcloud doesn't have a period tracker. There are plenty of apps. We have a big app ecosystem, but we really don't have one. And as I said, 26% of the world population is menstruating on any given day. So there are plenty of use cases for an application like that. So my idea for an app actually started a few years ago. First of all, I have my own issues with my period, and always bother me. So I start by creating a calendar that's called period tracker, because I thought that would be easier to enter data Nextcloud has a bunch of applications on the phone that you can use to sync your calendar. So it'll be easy to just enter notes on the calendar, and I would have a calendar view of my menstrual cycle. Also, I'm under the impression that most apps are developed with the focus on ovulation and of the actual bleeding period, instead of also the symptoms that surround it. And for me, it would be important to have an application where I could track how many days of the month I'm actually in pain, and all the symptoms that leads to the actual period. So this is what I try. And then, so calendar has some limitations. You cannot really put on graphs this information. You don't really have fields that you can enter detailed data. So I was looking into it, and then there is also this app that's called Health. You can track your mood, medication, activities, but it still lacks period component. And to be honest, I also try pen and paper. Do you want full privacy? Go offline, right? That would be the easiest way. During my research, I found printable period trackers. There's plenty out there. With the manual tracking, the issue was that I couldn't really group information or look for it in an easy way. I couldn't do a Control F, So this is the Ishangu bone. If you do some Googling, you find that this is considered the oldest period tracker ever found. It is about 20,000 years old. It's an animal bone. And you can see there are some marks incising it in 3 columns. So there are a bunch of theories, of course, of what this actually is. And one of them is that could be a period tracker, or they're possibly just tracking the moon cycle. But then again, grouping information, searching for it, not the easiest in bone or paper. So that's what led me to think, okay, let me try to develop something, how hard that could be, right? So that's what I want to share now a bit with you, like how it is to develop an application for Nextcloud. Is it really hard or not? I'll give you some details about the technologies. So Nextcloud, it is written in PHP. It's a very common used language. And the organization and the company, we tend to be very practical. We try to use the best tool for the job. So Nextcloud is written in PHP, and the front end is Vue.js. But we also have parts of the server that are written in Go, which is the high-performance backend for Talk. And there's another component that's written in Rust. And we are working also on a project to make it possible to write Nextcloud applications in other languages, which should also in the future include C++. But the app ecosystem right now is mostly in PHP. If you want to look for applications, most of them will be written in PHP and JavaScript. So my application, it is in PHP and JavaScript. So the first step, I would say, and that's what I did, was to look for an application that does something similar to what I wanted to do. So I talked before about Deck, and Deck is this Kanban app, and they have a nice integration with Calendar. Because what I would like to do is to have a nice integration with Calendar, so for notifications, or even possibly to enter some of this data. So when you need to figure out how to do something, you can look for applications in our App Store or on GitHub. You can find a bunch of them, and then you can read the code and check it out how you can do things. Then the next thing I did was to create an app skeleton. So you can go to our apps.nextcloud.com. There is a generator there, and that actually makes things much easier. You have essentially then basic application with an UI and a backend, and you can already just run some commands and install in your server. Then after you have these files, you should play around, look at it, take a look at what is there. And in this process, I also decided that I wanted to use a proper IDE to work with PHP, because I'm not used to working with PHP, so I thought I should get all the help I could get. So I decided to go for PHP Storm, which is what my colleagues in the server use. They have a good support for the language and good syntax highlighting. There's also Visual Studio Code, which I would say is also probably a good option. And if you want to be very quick, you can use GitHub Codespace, which is Visual Studio Code Online. So this is the basic structure that you get, which is a lot of files. But in this structure, you even have a README already. You have the license, a git ignore file. So, and with the files, you also already get a make file that will have all the rules that you can run and build the app, and from there you can already have it installed in your server. And then, so this is an important step. So what makes easy to develop things for Nextcloud is that we have an app framework that you can use. So you don't have to implement, for instance, user management, or if you want to share files in your application, you don't have to re-implement that. Nextcloud already makes it available for you. So in the composer file, you have the dependencies that you need for that. And then in your class in PHP, you can import like the framework, what you want to use from the framework in your application. And then you can extend the Nextcloud functionalities instead of having to rewrite it. Then this is the lib folder where you find most of all your PHP classes. And then under lib and app info, you have to register all your services. This file is loaded every time you access a page in Nextcloud. So this file contains the dynamic declaration of an app. It defines what the app does in Nextcloud in general on the server side. So what are services? These are the core functionalities implementations. Your server's class will talk directly to the database. So here's just an example of one of my classes, like contraceptive. So in my application, I would like to, for each day, you can enter data, and one of the things that you can enter is which contraceptive you're using and symptoms. And the symptoms, you have categories, like if it's your mood, or if it's like, if you're having tender breasts or cramps. So this is just an example of where I'm creating a new contraceptive in the database. And this is, let's say, a bit more complex part of it. So these are the routes that you need to define. So each of these, it's an endpoint for, so an endpoint has a route and a controller method to handle the network requests. So this is just an example of using what I'm calling calendar, and you need to have a route to each of the actions that you want to do: create, show, update, or delete. And that's gonna have a corresponding method in the controller. So in this case, in the calendar controller, I will have create function that matches with the route. So it's gonna create one entry in the calendar. So the controller will be called for each request, and it will then talk to your server's classes, and the server's class is the one that's gonna be directly then manipulating the data in the database. And under the database folder, you find all your getters and setters for each of the database entities, essentially. So all those calendar, category, contraceptive, and symptom are all tables in my database. And then under the migration folder, so this code is executed every time you install, update, or remove the application. So you can define what's going to happen when a new version of your application is out. So you can create a table or change the table, and that's what you do under the migration folder. These files have a naming convention to define what should be run. And Nextcloud keeps track of all the migrations that has been done, so it knows which one should be run on the update of the app or when you install it. And besides the backend, so that was all about PHP, the backend, Nextcloud also offers Vue.js components. So out of the box, your application can look like the server. You don't have to create CSS you don't have to create things from scratch. You can if you want, but we provide also Vue.js components that you can use. So these components will be installed via the package JSON file. So here's our dependencies. So these are the JavaScript dependencies. So you see their Nextcloud view, and there is the view material design icons, which are icons that you can also use out of the box. Then you're going to import each of those components that you want to use. Like here, pencil and delete are just icons that you can use. And then you have the actions, which will be buttons that you can use in your forms. So this is my app.view file. So this is your front end. You can create as many views as you need. So you can see here the use of the components. There is action button, which would be just a button, and there you can see the delete, which is an icon. So I have this code and some basic functions. It's under this repository if you'd like to check it out. So that's where I am now with my application. It's a very basic thing. I do not have published it yet in the App Store. I really would like, as I say, to extend it to use the calendar from Nextcloud. And also be able to have this information in graphs and, yeah. This is an honorable mention, talking about privacy. Drip is a project, a Berliner's project. It's open source, but it's only mobile. And it really keeps your data in your phone. And you can import it, but doesn't have syncing. So maybe in the future, really cool to collaborate and have a Nextcloud integration, so I don't need to have a mobile application. So concluding now this conversation, I think the main things I would like to share that I would like you to remember is, the main thing would be for me about, to have diversity with inclusion. So in a perfect world, of course, none of these should be issues. How our body works or how it looks would not matter. So all those things should not matter. And we should get all the flexibility you need from our employees and our communities, right? So we can do the best work we can do, even with all the differences. And maybe you alone in your community can be the safe space that someone that you know that is from a social minority, it can be the safe space and the help that they need. And then maybe as a manager, you can do a better job at supporting your team if you remember there is a load when you are the only one in the team. And as for developers, I hope I convince you that you can use Nextcloud as a platform if you want to develop an application that cares about privacy. And of course, there's my project that I would like to continue working on. And I would love to get feedback and ideas, and if you'd like to contribute to it, I would love to see that. And maybe next year I can be here telling you how is it going and, show you some more progress. But that's it for tonight. Thank you.
So just because I missed it, what was the name of the drip application or thing?
The name of the application is DRIP.
Oh, so that's just the, okay.
Yeah, that's the name.
Okay.
So it's been like more than 10 years I haven't written any PHP. You mentioned that it was possible to write the apps in Python or Rust. Can they run directly on the Nextcloud server and without any changes?
Maybe Daphne can help me here. As far as I know, there's no really changes. You can run those. You can run processes, right, separated from the. Daphne is the team. She works on
the team lead of that system here.
Yeah.
So the way that is currently the best way to develop apps on Nextcloud is still in PHP, but it's really easy to learn. I'm not a developer at all by education, and I learned it also, so I'm sure that you can too. Well, then you should definitely try it out. We have tutorials at nextcloud.com/developer, starting with Hello World. And I wrote them, so they are really good. Okay, well, I think you will be fine. And for the new ecosystem for developing apps in other programming languages, you can search on the Nextcloud repository called App API, and that will describe the current state of things.
Okay. Also, do you have any plans to upgrade to Vue 3? Because I saw it was...
Back to Camila.
I might know the answer. So what is?
I thought it was using Vue. I'm familiar with Vue, but I've started migrating all my code to Vue 3, which is basically becoming like a new standard. And so do you have plans to also upgrade the base?
No, not as far as I know.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
So obviously the privacy aspect was one of the big motivators for this, but it seems like from what you were showing with the calendar, there are also just some user experience problems with the other apps that you had found. So I'm just kind of wondering what that discovery process was like, what you looked into as far as what was on the table and what apps existed and what they weren't providing and what they were, and if you found anything that was close but was just missing the privacy aspect, or just a bit more about that.
Okay. So personally, what I felt like I was missing was more about the view. So most applications would have a calendar view, but was always highlighting about the bleeding period. Was never about, you could not really look at the calendar and see how many days you have pain or other things around it, or would highlight your ovulation period. Because as I said, personally, I have issues, and my issues is I'm not really worried about when I'm bleeding, but I want to be able to show to my doctor how many days in the month I was in pain and had other problems like depression and such things. And for me, that's what I was missing, that I noticed. Does that answer it a little?
Yeah, and so you didn't find any apps that were tracking that at all? Those were just completely...
No, because for me, one of the criteria was about privacy too. So I really tried to watch that, and the ones I tried, so like Drip in the phone, I do miss this kind of use too, even though they do care about privacy.
Yeah, I was mostly thinking from okay, there is an app that does user experience
Yeah.
for the app that I actually want perspective. So yeah.
Yeah.
So also about privacy, I realize that we're hosting it on our, on our own server, but what, what is preventing a government or other entity from subpoenaing that server? How do we protect ourselves that way?
That's a very good question. You can.
Sorry, it's kind of a generic question, therefore I have a kind of generic answer there, but I think there are two things to that. I mean, first of all, one of the problems with information sometimes getting subpoenaed is you don't know about it, which is really unpleasant, but in case of, there's often a gag order on it, so you won't know. And I mean, that's obviously not going to be the case if it's your own server. And the other part is, and I think honestly, they're already a bit easier with subpoenaing it if it's at a third party than when it is on your own server, right? I mean, you'll have to surrender information when you're getting sued, but you fundamentally do not have to cooperate with, so if it's a criminal case, you don't have to give incriminating information. Somebody else would have to give incriminating information on you. So like, yeah, if it's a criminal case and the data is at Microsoft, then they can subpoena Microsoft. Microsoft has to give it. But if the data is on your own server, you don't have to cooperate in getting yourself, yeah, so you don't have to hand over the data, period. That's just how it is. Yeah. Yeah, so that's only in the civil case, of course, you still have to hand it over, but not in the criminal one. So.
Yeah, I couldn't.
If somebody here in the U.S. is getting, the scenario I thought of was that if somebody here in the U.S. Had incriminating evidence about maybe a miscarriage, which now with some of the new laws in some of the states, of course California is excluded, but some of the new laws in some of the states, that woman would be brought to trial. It would be a criminal trial. I didn't think about the law that protects her from having to present incriminating evidence. So that's a very good point. Exactly.
Yeah, it was a good question. I really had. I would not know how to think.
Okay, so there are no more questions. Oh.
I don't know anything about PHP, so I think we're okay there. I know it's spelled with capitals. That's about it. I know this is a work in progress for you, and you mentioned there are a lot of functions you're looking forward to integrating. I'm curious for you, at what point do you integrate the functions where you feel comfortable submitting it to the Nextcloud App Store, for instance? Because I wondered if that would bring more people's attention to it and therefore more contributions. I'm curious for you, where's that point, and what are you hoping to integrate until you make it more public?
I would like to have this, let's say my dream thing in the app is to have this calendar view. Even if it's a very simple calendar view, just listing the information per day, I think that will be my point to like, okay, I think this could be different and interesting, and I would put it on the App Store and with some more, like what I showed here was super basic, like there's so much more in the code base, like testing. We can write tests in even the downloaded app skeleton, you have some tests. I would like to, do it in a proper way. I find like, yeah, as I was talking to Daphne, I find it's scary that people will be using my application for such a thing that it's important, right? So, yeah, I would like to have at least that.
Hi, so my question is more based around just the general Nextcloud web app ecosystem.
Yeah.
I've been using web app or Nextcloud for quite a long time, and I know you guys have, obviously, as you showed, LibreOffice and a calendar and a couple other general applications. I have some contacts in that work for Thunderbird, and they're currently working on their Android app. But another common thing that was brought up with them is, well, if you're going to try and compete with, say, for example, Google's G Suite, how are you going to do that? And one of the ideas, or just off the top of the dome things that came across was, well, what if rather than trying to generate a whole new G Suite, what if we do a Thunderbird web app that can drop in alongside those already existing technologies? And that would also possibly help with like enhancing the calendar, because Thunderbird also has calendar integrations and whatnot. The contact that I had, they wanted to know
Okay.
if that would be something that Nextcloud was interested in pursuing, if that would be something cool, and what would you need from their side if, in order to like try and make that happen? Sorry, I know that's kind of a long
Yeah.
question.
Okay. No, I just wonder, so right now we are working with, we are like, how do you say, taking over Roundcube. Do you know the project? But I'm not sure if that would, because right now we have mail, right? But it's just a mail application. It's not the server. So what you are describing would be like a Thunderbird app. Yeah. I guess it's something possible, what you do. Yeah, you think that will be enough? Yeah.
As I also happen to manage Nextcloud's integration portfolio, I wear a few different hats at Nextcloud. You can definitely look into how Nextcloud can make integrations, because we integrate everybody, so also you if you want to, if you're willing to do the work.
Right, yeah. That was another thing too fun. I was like, would it be as simple as maybe like just dropping a PR and saying, hey, we did this?
Yeah, generally, yes.
We will have to think a bit more about how to exactly you want the integration to look, but if you can already maybe see some examples in the App Store of other applications that did something similar to what you want, it should definitely be possible, and we are happy to collaborate with you.
Exactly. That's why when you said Roundcube, I was like, oh, that makes sense, kind of easy.
So for like syncing like data from, like I know some period apps, you can track like your temperature with like an armband or something you wear while you're sleeping, and then you sync that information to an app, and then it kind of like whatever it does in the background to like tell you like how many days you are from ovulation or menstruation or whatever, right? Is it possible with like Nextcloud to like sync to some sort of like, I guess it's basically like an IoT device or whatever, and then have that data go to like that app that you're building?
It sounds like it will be possible. For instance, so from this, could you export this information, or there is a?
Yeah. So you don't have to use like the app that like they sell you. Like the one my wife uses, for example, you pay like a monthly fee, and then they agree not to sell your data.
That's one way of doing that.
Yeah. So, yeah. So
Yeah.
but it's, I'm like it's ridiculous that you have to do that, right? So something like this is like way more appealing, where I can like put it in my like, home server or whatever, and I have to worry about it. So.
Yeah, but so you can export the data from the application, right? You said.
Yeah, so it does it's just like a Bluetooth like device, right? You like sync it with the app. So,
Okay.
I assume if there's like a way to get like you're syncing photos from your phone to your Nextcloud app, probably sync up.
Yeah, I would expect to be able to work with something like that. You just have to see if like you can, if it's a CSV file or something that you can work with, that totally should be able to. Because I was thinking about this drip app that I showed. You can export the data to a CSV file. And actually, there is even an open issue in the repository about syncing this information. Because right now you can export, but it doesn't go anywhere, right? So with other applications, you could, I would expect you can have a syncing folder and use that to sync this kind of, yeah. So you could have another application and just have like my application on the server to view this information. You know, something like that. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question, but, or I guess encouragement. A lot of my friends and lovers have used the Drip app, and or that have periods use the Drip app and really like it, but this calendar and syncing function, especially like cross-device, they would all benefit from that a lot. And I'm curious if you've started conversations with Drip about doing development that way, or is it just early stages right now and
so
working towards
I
it?
actually tried. I have opened an issue in the repository a while ago. Actually, even other people comment in it, saying that would be great if you could sync to Nextcloud. I didn't hear from them. But now that I am actually really, really working on it, I would like to try to reach out to them. I mean, we are in the same city even. I have met them before.
Okay.
So I'm thinking of putting more effort into that. Now that I have, this part of, let's say that it would be interesting if Nextcloud really, if my application could read this information, then you have the graphs right in the server or something like that.
Yeah, and the data syncing part, super valuable, but also I think the piece that you're talking about of actually visually seeing like mood and symptom change across years or months or whatever.
Yeah.
I've known my friends have had to do that manually, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's, that would be my dream app. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending the Hacking Nextcloud to Track Your Period. The slides will be available online on the Scale website. And thank you, Camila, Ayres, for this lovely talk.